I never thought much about the window in my bedroom. It faces the backyard, a stretch of patchy grass and an old maple tree that creaks when the wind kicks up. I grew up in this house. Slept in this room as a kid. Stared out this same window, back when my biggest fear was the shadows of branches scratching the glass. I wish it were just branches now. The first night I heard her, I thought it was my imagination, maybe a cat, maybe the wind. But when you hear someone crying, truly crying, it's unmistakable. It has weight to it. An edge that cuts right through your sleep. I'd gone to bed late that night. Couldn't stop scrolling my phone, one eye half shut, until I finally gave up and clicked it off. The house was dead quiet. My parents live upstate now, so it's just me here. I'm supposed to be getting it ready to sell, fixing up my childhood home. But I haven't done much yet. I woke up at 2:14 a.m. I remember because the blinking red numbers on my alarm clock felt so stupidly bright in the dark. And then I heard it, soft at first, like someone trying not to wake me. But the longer I lay there, the louder it got. A woman, crying just beyond the glass. I stayed frozen in my bed for what felt like an hour. My brain tried to explain it away. Maybe a neighbor, maybe someone walking through the yard, maybe a drunk girl from the bar a few blocks down. But that made no sense. My fence is tall. There's no gate on that side. And this voice, it was so close. Like she was pressed right up against the window frame. Eventually, I forced myself to sit up and peek through the blinds. Nothing. Just the backyard. The moon was out, and it made everything silver and unreal. But no one was there. The crying stopped the second I touched the blinds. I told myself I must have dreamed it. I had to. I lay awake until dawn, every squeak of the tree making my heart pound. The next day, I didn't tell anyone. Who would I tell? I live alone. I'm almost 30. I'm not a kid anymore. I had coffee. I showered. I went about my day like a rational adult. But then came the second night. This time, I heard her sooner. 1:48 a.m. I just drifted off when the wailing started, soft and shuddering, like someone mourning at a funeral they weren't allowed to attend. I told myself not to look. Just don't look. Maybe if I ignore her, she'll stop. She didn't stop. The crying went on for 20 minutes. Sometimes it was right at the glass, like she was whispering through it. Other times, it felt like she was somewhere deeper in the yard, hidden under that maple tree. I don't know what possessed me, but I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. My hands were shaking so badly the beam jittered across the lawn. Still, nothing. No footprints, no shape moving between the fence posts. Just emptiness. The crying cut off when I pointed the light at the window. I called my mom the next morning. She laughed, said I was probably overtired, stressed from the house and the repairs and my dead-end job. I agreed with her because it was easier than admitting I was scared. Easier than saying that part of me wanted to sleep with the lights on. By the third night, I tried earplugs. Big, neon foam plugs you shove deep into your head until you hear your own heartbeat. They didn't work. I woke up at 3 a.m., dead awake, and the plugs were on my pillow. Like I'd pulled them out in my sleep. This time, the crying wasn't just outside my window. It was closer. I swear I heard the soft, wet hitch of her breath, like she was crouched under the sill, pressing her face against the siding. I didn't dare look. I pulled the covers over my head and prayed for morning. Now it's the fifth night. I've stopped pretending I'm not going to hear her. I sit in bed, laptop open, typing this. I don't know why I'm writing it down, maybe to prove to myself I'm not losing it. She hasn't started yet. It's just after midnight. Any minute now, she'll come back. I keep glancing at the glass, half expecting a pale face to appear there, half praying it does so I can stop wondering. I don't know what she wants. I don't know how she got into my yard. I just know she cries. And tonight, I'm not sure I'll be able to keep myself from opening that window. I didn't open the window that night. I sat there for hours, my back against the headboard, staring at the glass while she cried for what felt like forever. At some point, the crying changed. It wasn't just soft sobs anymore. There were words, or almost words, buried in the weeping. Garbled syllables, like she was trying to form sentences through a throat scraped raw. I didn't understand any of it. And I didn't want to. When the sun finally dragged itself over the horizon, I collapsed onto my pillow like I'd run a marathon. I don't remember falling asleep. I just remember dreaming of the window of her face, pale and wet, pressed against the glass. Eyes too wide, mouth trembling, hair hanging like soaked weeds. When I woke up, it was nearly noon. My phone was dead. The house felt colder than it should have. I swear I could still feel the draft of her presence in the room. That afternoon, I did something I haven't done in years. I called up Rick, an old friend from high school. Rick's the kind of guy who believes in ghosts the same way people believe in taxes. He hates it, but he knows they're real. He's also the only one who never laughed when I told him about weird things as a kid. We met at a diner near the highway. He showed up with a six-pack of energy drinks and a duffel bag full of junk, EMF meters, an old digital recorder, a cheap thermal camera. He slapped it on the table like a traveling salesman showing his wares. "Okay, tell me everything," he said. "Don't leave anything out." So I did. I told him about the crying woman, about the window, about how she never shows up if I look too soon. He listened without a single smirk, which somehow made it worse. When I finished, he tapped his fingers on the Formica tabletop. "You ever think maybe it's not the house?" he asked. "Maybe it's you." "Thanks, man. Super comforting." "I'm serious. Some stuff sticks to people. Maybe you brought her here." I hated that idea that this thing might follow me wherever I go. But I hated not knowing more. Rick made me promise to let him spend the night. He said he'd bring all his toys, camp out in my room, and if the woman came back, we'd catch her on tape. I didn't want him here. Not really. But a piece of me was desperate for someone else to hear her, to prove I wasn't slipping. So that's how we ended up back at my house just after sunset. Rick set up his gear like it was an episode of a budget ghost hunting show. He stuck the EMF meter on my windowsill, clicked the recorder on, and told me to act normal, like I always did when she came. The waiting was the worst part. Every creak of the house felt amplified. Every gust of wind made the maple branches claw at the siding like bony fingers. We sat in the dark with only the red glow of the recorder light between us. Then, just past 1 a.m., I felt it. It's weird to say you can feel crying, but you can. The air gets thick, like the room is full of water. Rick must have felt it too, because he sat up straight, eyes darting to the window. At first, it was faint, a hiccuping sound, like someone holding back sobs. Then it built, layer by layer, until the same mournful wail I'd come to dread filled the room. Rick's eyes were huge. He mouthed, "Holy shit." He grabbed the thermal camera, pointed it at the glass. For a second, I thought I saw something, a smear of cold in the shape of a person, slumped just beneath the sill. But when Rick adjusted the angle, it was gone. He whispered, "Ask her something." I shook my head violently. But he kept nudging me, eyes wild, until I croaked out, "What do you want?" The crying stopped. We both held our breath. The silence was 1,000 times worse than the sobs. Rick's recorder made a tiny hiss, like it was catching something we couldn't hear. Then, in that hush, a voice came. Not crying, a word, clear as glass, whispered through the window. "Home." Rick and I jerked back at the same time. I felt my chest tighten like someone had dropped a stone in it. The EMF meter flickered red. The word hung between us like a sour smell. "Did you hear that?" Rick whispered. I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. He played the recorder back, right there in the dark. The static was a roar, but buried in it, the same word surfaced, "Home." That was last night. Rick left just before dawn, promising he'd look into old records, deaths, disappearances, anything that might explain her. It's almost midnight again. I'm writing this with the recorder in my lap, Rick's gear still spread across the floor. I'm exhausted. I haven't slept properly in days. Outside, the branches of the maple tree scrape against the siding. I swear I can hear something else, just under the wind. Not quite crying yet, but close. She's coming back. I know it. And now she's saying words. I didn't mean to fall asleep. I'd told myself I wouldn't, that I'd stay up all night with Rick's recorder clutched to my chest like some cheap talisman. But exhaustion is a predator. It waits until your guard is down, until your eyes slide shut for just a second. When I woke up, I knew instantly I'd messed up. The digital clock blinked 3:03 a.m. in angry red slashes. My room was freezing, though the radiator hissed like it was working overtime. The EMF meter on the windowsill glowed steady red. And she was here again. At first, it was only the faint sound of weeping, that familiar, suffocating grief that has soaked its way into my bones. But this time, I felt something else. A presence so close it made my skin crawl. It wasn't just outside the window anymore. It felt like she was inside somehow, folded into the shadows at the corners of the room. I didn't want to move. I lay there, my back pressed into the mattress, the blankets pulled up to my chin like I was 8 years old again, convinced that if I stayed still, she couldn't touch me. But the crying grew louder, ragged gasps now, broken by soft murmurs. I thought of Rick. He'd wanted me to talk to her again. He said it might help, that if she was stuck, maybe she needed someone to listen. But I didn't want to listen. I didn't want her voice in my head any more than it already was. Still, I couldn't help myself. My mouth worked before my brain caught up. "Who are you?" I croaked. Silence. Then, so close I swore she was right above me, came a single word. "Home." The same word as before, but different this time. Not a plea, more like a reminder. I screwed my eyes shut, heart hammering against my ribs so hard it hurt. Something creaked near the window. I forced myself to peek. The blinds were open. I didn't remember leaving them that way. And pressed against the glass was a shape, a pale smear, a hint of wet hair clinging to skin. I saw the curve of a cheek, the glisten of tears. She wasn't looking in. She was looking down, her face half hidden behind a curtain of matted hair. Then, slowly, her head turned. And she looked right at me. I scrambled backwards so fast I hit my shoulder on the headboard. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Just a hoarse, choked gasp. Her eyes were black hollows. Not empty, wet. As if her tears were endless, leaking out, staining the glass in tiny, shimmering rivers. She pressed a hand to the window. Thin, bony fingers with nails that looked cracked and gray. And through the glass, I heard her again, clearer than ever, though her lips barely moved. "Let me in." I shook my head. "No, no, no." Her hand twitched, scratching the pane. The sound made my teeth ache. The EMF meter flickered like a dying heartbeat. The air in my room felt thick enough to drown in. And then, as if someone flipped a switch, she was gone. Just gone. No wailing. No shadow on the glass. Nothing but the frost left behind where her palm had pressed the window. I didn't sleep again. I sat there until dawn, every muscle locked up, listening to the wind rattle the fence outside. When the sun rose, the frost melted, but a print remained. The faint outline of her fingers, oily smudges that refused to wipe away no matter how hard I scrubbed. Rick came back that afternoon, wild-eyed and unshaven. He slammed a stack of papers on my kitchen table. Old property records, death certificates, newspaper clippings with headlines that made my stomach twist. There was a woman, he said, lived here back in the 60s. Her name was Margaret Lee. Husband left her, took their baby girl, and vanished. Neighbors said she used to stand in the yard at night, calling for them to come home. One night she just stopped, hung herself in that old maple tree out back. I looked through the articles, grainy black and white photos of a woman with long dark hair and tired eyes. Even in the faded print, I could see it. The same grief I'd heard outside my window, night after night. "She thinks you're him," Rick said, voice low. "She thinks you're her family. She thinks she's home." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to throw him out of my house. But I couldn't. The window upstairs seemed to pulse in the back of my mind. A constant, invisible pressure, begging to be opened. That night, Rick insisted we try something else. He wanted to set up motion sensors around the yard, salt the window frame, every half-baked ghost hunting trick he could think of. I didn't argue. I was too tired to care. We spent hours sprinkling salt lines, rigging up cheap cameras, drawing tiny chalk symbols like that would matter. By the time we finished, it was nearly midnight again. I don't know why, but when Rick said he'd stay up to watch the feeds in the living room, I felt a twist of dread. I should have begged him to stay with me. I should have known she wouldn't like the salt. Or Rick. Or any of it. Now it's just past 1 a.m. Rick's been quiet for 20 minutes. Too quiet. I keep telling myself he fell asleep on the couch. But part of me knows. The crying has started again. But this time, it's not outside my window. It's coming from the hallway. She's inside. And she's looking for me. I should have run. When I heard the crying shift from the backyard to the hallway, I should have grabbed my keys, my phone, anything, and bolted out the front door. But I didn't. I froze again. That's the worst part of this. It's like she's inside my head, whispering lullabies that keep me rooted in place while the walls close in. The wailing was soft at first, muffled like someone sobbing into their hands. But it grew, layer by layer, until it filled every crevice of the house. It bounced off the hallway walls, slid under my bedroom door, seeped into my ears. I pressed my hands to my head, trying to block it out, but the sound just burrowed deeper. I forced myself out of bed. My knees cracked as I stood. They felt like they belonged to someone twice my age. I grabbed Rick's digital recorder and the flashlight I'd left on my dresser. The hallway light was off. That was wrong. We'd left it on when we set up the salt lines, but now the bulb was dead, or maybe she'd taken the light away. The air smelled wrong, too damp, metallic, like wet leaves stuck under rotting wood. The floorboards creaked as I stepped into the hall. The crying was clearer now, coming from downstairs. "Rick?" I hissed. No answer. Just that low, endless sobbing, echoing from the living room. I made my way down, one step at a time, flashlight beam bouncing wildly. When I reached the bottom, I saw him, Rick, slumped in the recliner by the window, the motion sensors blinking uselessly around him. He looked asleep at first, head lolled back, mouth slightly open. But when I got closer, I saw his eyes. Wide open, staring at the ceiling like he'd seen something so awful it froze him there forever. I dropped the recorder. It clattered across the floor, but he didn't flinch. I grabbed his shoulders, shook him, whispered his name until my voice broke. Nothing. Then I noticed the salt. The careful lines we'd made along the window frame and the doors, all of it was smeared. Like someone had dragged wet fingers through it, wiping the protection away grain by grain. I heard her before I saw her. The crying stopped for a heartbeat, then shifted, a low, crooning sound, like a mother comforting a child. It was coming from behind me. I turned so slowly my spine popped. In the doorway to the kitchen, she stood half in shadow, half in the beam of my flashlight. Margaret, or what was left of her. Her hair hung in strings over her face, dripping water that pattered softly onto the wood floor. Her dress was old, soaked through, clinging to her thin frame like peeling wallpaper. She lifted her head, and for the first time, I saw her eyes, black pits rimmed with raw skin, tears leaking endlessly from nowhere. "Home," she whispered. I backed away, tripping over Rick's foot. The flashlight fell from my hands, skidding under the coffee table. I reached for it blindly, fingers scraping the carpet, but when I looked up again, she was gone. The house was silent. The kind of silence that makes your eardrums buzz. Rick still hadn't moved. I grabbed his wrist, his pulse thumped, slow but steady. I slapped his face, gentle at first, then harder. His eyes fluttered, rolled back, then settled on me. "She was here," he rasped. "She was inside." I nodded. My mouth felt stuffed with cotton. "We need to leave. Now." But Rick just shook his head. "It's too late." The front door slammed. Not a breeze, not some draft. It slammed like an angry parent coming home to find a mess they told you not to make. The temperature dropped so fast I saw my breath bloom in the air. Then came the footsteps upstairs, soft, dragging steps, like someone in wet slippers pacing back and forth above our heads. "She's looking for the baby," Rick croaked. "What baby?" He grabbed my sleeve. "She thinks it's you." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to shove him, tell him to snap out of it. But the footsteps came closer, paused over the spot where my bedroom was. A soft knock echoed down the staircase. 3 slow raps, like the gentle knock of a mother testing if her child was awake. "Don't answer," Rick hissed. I didn't plan to. But part of me wanted to go up there, to open the door, to see her face again, to tell her I wasn't who she thought I was. Maybe then she'd leave. Another knock. Then the crying returned, right above our heads. Muffled, wet, desperate. Rick's eyes rolled back again. He mumbled something, a prayer maybe, or just gibberish. I grabbed him by the shoulders and forced him up. "Come on. We're leaving. Now." We staggered to the door. It wouldn't budge. The lock turned, but the frame felt fused, like it had grown into the wall. Rick tried the windows next, same thing. The air thickened around us, the sobbing seeping through the cracks in the drywall. I felt something brush my shoulder, a cold, damp weight that made me flinch. I turned. She was right there, inches away, her face almost gentle now, like a mother cooing to a baby she'd finally found. Her mouth moved. No sound came out, just a bubble of water slipping from her lips. Then, clear as day, I heard it in my head. "Let me in." I stumbled back, heart thundering so hard my vision blurred. Rick collapsed on the couch, gasping for breath. The room spun, the walls seemed to ripple, the floorboards swelling under my feet like waterlogged flesh. I don't remember falling. Just the impact. My head hit the edge of the coffee table and everything went dark. When I came to, it was morning. The crying was gone. Rick was gone too, but his bag was still there, his keys on the floor next to the salt canister. Upstairs, the window in my room was wide open. The curtains billowed in the cold breeze. And in the frost on the glass, I saw it again, the word. Home. Morning should have made me feel safe, but it didn't. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, staring at the open window while my breath misted in the cold. The frost had melted where the word home had been scratched into the glass, but I could still see it in my mind, etched there like a scar. Rick was gone. His gear was scattered all over the living room, cables coiled like dead snakes, the EMF meter still blinking a dull red. His duffel bag sat by the door, open and abandoned. His car was still in the driveway, keys left on the floor like he'd dropped them mid-step. I called his cell a dozen times that morning. Straight to voicemail. No answer at his apartment either. Part of me wondered if he'd run, if he'd seen enough and decided I was on my own. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Rick wasn't the kind to abandon anyone. Not willingly. I should have left too. But something kept me here. A tug in my chest that felt like a hook buried deep under my ribs, reeling me back every time I thought about packing a bag and walking out the front door. The house creaked around me like it was breathing. The old maple tree out back shivered in the wind, its bare branches clawing at the side of the house. I kept waiting for the crying to start again. But the day passed in silence, a smothering, heavy quiet that made every tick of the clock feel like a countdown. By nightfall, I'd given up pretending I could leave. I found myself upstairs, taping black trash bags over the window in my room, like that would matter. I sprinkled what was left of Rick's salt around the frame, drew clumsy chalk symbols on the sill. It felt ridiculous, a child's fort against a storm that would always find a crack. At 1:07 a.m., the crying returned. It was different this time. Softer. Closer. It didn't seep through the window, it rose from the walls, from the floorboards, from the very bones of this old house. I sat on the bed, covers clenched in my fists, eyes locked on the black plastic fluttering where the breeze slipped through. Then I heard footsteps. Wet, dragging footsteps in the hallway. A whisper scraped against my ear, though no one was there. Home. I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them, the plastic on the window was gone, ripped away, the glass bare and slick with condensation. And pressed against it was her face. Margaret. Her eyes were wide and bottomless, tears spilling over the sills of those empty sockets. Her hair clung to her cheeks in wet ropes. She didn't look angry. She looked tired. So impossibly tired. Like all she wanted was to rest, but the house wouldn't let her. She lifted a hand, palm flat on the glass. This time, I didn't flinch. I didn't pull the blankets over my head or reach for my phone. I just sat there, heart pounding so hard it hurt. She mouthed the word again. Home. And for a moment, I saw it. A flash behind her, a memory that wasn't mine. The yard decades ago, lush and green. A swing hanging from the old maple tree. A man standing at the fence, suitcase in hand. A little girl crying on the porch steps. Margaret, at this same window, watching them go. Her world draining out through a gap in the fence she couldn't fix. I don't know if she put that in my head, or if the house did. But when she spoke again, her voice was in the room, all around me. Let me in. I wanted to say no. I wanted to run. But my body betrayed me. I felt my legs moving before my mind caught up, carrying me to the window. My fingers found the latch. Cold metal bit into my skin. As the window swung open, a gust of freezing air hit me. The branches of the maple tree rattled like dry bones. Margaret leaned forward, but didn't climb in. She hovered on the threshold, her breath mingling with mine in the cold. Then she smiled. It was the saddest thing I'd ever seen. That cracked, weary smile that told me she'd been waiting too long, that she'd given up on the world ever making sense again. She reached out. Her hand brushed my cheek. Ice and water, and something that felt like grief made solid. I flinched, but didn't pull away. A tear slipped down my own face, trailing cold into the corner of my mouth. Home, she whispered again. Her hand dropped. She faded like smoke, a trick of the dark, a ripple through the glass. The cold remained, curling around my ankles, seeping into the floor. I slammed the window shut, locked it, backed away until my knees hit the bed. The house was silent. The air felt lighter somehow, but emptier too. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the window, waiting for her to come back. She didn't. The next morning, I found Rick's car door wide open, keys in the ignition, battery dead. No sign of him. No note. No footprints in the dirt except mine. I tried to leave after that. Packed my bags, loaded my car. But when I reached the end of the driveway, something pulled me back. That same hook in my chest, yanking me toward the yard, the tree, the window. I've stopped fighting it now. The for sale sign out front is buried in overgrown grass. I've let the fence rot. I don't fix the leaks in the roof. This house isn't meant to be saved. Sometimes, when the wind is right, I hear her. Not crying anymore, just humming, low and sweet, like a mother's lullaby drifting through the branches. Sometimes I hum back. Last night, I caught my reflection in the window and saw her standing behind me, a smear of wet hair and shadows, watching, waiting. I think she knows I won't leave. Maybe I'm all she needed. Someone to keep her company. Someone to remind the house it's still home. And maybe, just maybe, that's all I wanted too.